What if one voice could change music forever, inspire millions of people, and challenge an entire generation to think differently? John Lennon was more than a musician. He was a dreamer, a rebel, a songwriter, and one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. But behind the fame, the screaming crowds, and the legendary music, there was a man who experienced loss, struggled with identity, faced the pressure of fame, and spent much of his life searching for meaning. His story began in Liverpool, England, and it would eventually take him from small clubs to the biggest stages in the world. This is the story of John Lennon, the man who helped change the world through music. John Winston Lennon was born on October 9, 1940, in Liverpool, England. His childhood was far from simple. His parents separated when he was young, and Lennon grew up in a complicated family environment. But even during those difficult years, one thing was clear. John had a powerful, creative spirit. He loved music, he loved art, and he had a personality that refused to fit neatly into the expectations of others. As a teenager, Lennon discovered that music could become a way to express himself. He formed a group called the Quarrymen. Then, in 1957, he met a young musician named Paul McCartney. The two quickly discovered that they shared a passion for music and songwriting. George Harrison eventually joined them, and years later, with Ringo Starr completing the lineup, the Beatles were born. What followed would become one of the greatest stories in music history. But before the fame, there was struggle. The Beatles didn't become famous overnight. They spent years performing in small clubs, playing long hours, and working to develop their sound. They faced rejection, they faced uncertainty, but they kept going. Night after night, performance after performance, they became better. Then everything changed. The Beatles exploded onto the world stage. Their music reached millions. Their concerts attracted enormous crowds. Their faces appeared on newspapers and magazines around the world. They became one of the biggest bands the world had ever seen. But fame came with a price. The pressure was enormous. Lennon and the other members were expected to constantly create new music while living under intense public attention. Every word they said could become news. Every decision could be criticized. And behind the excitement of Beatlemania was a growing desire for something more personal. Lennon wanted artistic freedom. He wanted to express his beliefs, and he wanted to discover who he was beyond being one of the four members of the Beatles. What made him legendary? What made John Lennon legendary wasn't simply his ability to sing, perform, or write songs. It was his willingness to challenge people. Lennon was never afraid to express his opinions, even when they were controversial. He used his music and his public platform to explore ideas about peace, society, love, and the human experience. His creative partnership with Paul McCartney became one of the most famous songwriting partnerships in history. Together, they helped transform popular music. The Beatles weren't simply making songs for entertainment. They were experimenting. They were taking risks, and they were showing the world that popular music could also be deeply artistic and meaningful. But Lennon was more than his talent. He was also deeply human. He could be funny. He could be unpredictable. He could be vulnerable. And sometimes he could be outspoken. He had flaws. He made mistakes. But that complexity made his story even more compelling. John Lennon wasn't remembered because he was perfect. He was remembered because he was authentic enough to show the world both his strengths and his imperfections. One of the greatest chapters of Lennon's life came during the Beatles' incredible rise to worldwide fame. The band didn't just become successful. They changed popular culture. Their music became the soundtrack of an entire generation. Their influence reached far beyond music. They influenced fashion, art, film, and the way people viewed popular culture itself, and John Lennon stood at the center of this revolution. But the story didn't end with the Beatles. In 1970, the band officially broke up. For millions of fans, it felt like the end of an era. But for Lennon, it was the beginning of a new chapter. He continued his career as a solo artist and began creating music that reflected his personal beliefs, relationships, experiences, and hopes for the future. He was no longer simply one part of the world's most famous band. He had a voice of his own, and he was determined to use it. John Lennon's legacy is complicated but undeniably powerful. His music continues to be discovered by new generations. His work with the Beatles helped redefine what a popular musician could be. He showed that artists could use their platform not only to entertain people, but also to make them think. His life also reminds us that fame does not make sense. On December 8, 1980, John Lennon was returning to his home at the Dakota in New York City with his wife, Yoko Ono. Earlier that day, Lennon had been working on music and spending time with Ono. That evening, as they returned home, Lennon was approached by Mark David Chapman, who had been waiting outside the building. Chapman shot Lennon 4 times with a firearm. Lennon was rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, but his injuries were fatal. At 11:15 p.m. on December 8, 1980, John Lennon was pronounced dead. He was only 40 years old. The news shocked the world. Millions of fans mourned the loss of a musician whose voice had helped define an entire generation. A man who had spent his life creating music was suddenly gone. But his story was not over, because although John Lennon's life had ended, his music had not. His influence had not, and his voice had not disappeared. John Lennon became part of a band that changed the world. But his story was never just about music. It was about a man searching for meaning, a man who experienced loss, a man who found incredible success, a man who faced the enormous pressure of fame, and a man who continued trying to understand himself and the world around him. His life ended far too soon. But perhaps the most powerful lesson from John Lennon's story is this: you may not have control over how long your life lasts, but you can choose what you leave behind. John Lennon left behind music. He left behind ideas. He left behind memories. And for millions of people around the world, he left behind a voice that continues to echo through generations. The man may be gone, but the music remains, the influence remains, and the story of John Lennon will never truly disappear. What do you think made John Lennon a true legend? Was it his music, his creativity, his influence, or the message he tried to share with the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more stories about the legends who changed the world. Because sometimes, a person's life may end, but the impact they leave behind can last forever.